Okay, thank you for joining the session. And I'm going to hand over to Walter, who's going to talk about the MA by Research in Philosophy.
All right, thanks so much for coming today. I'm going to present to you our program. The MA by Research in Philosophy is a special program. It's distinct from most master programs in philosophy you'd be able to find at other UK universities by really focusing on research, as the name implies. But how that looks in practice, I'll give you a brief presentation on how that looks. Now, I myself am a lecturer at the University of Reading, and I am directing the program. And essentially, what this program involves is a lot of independent research. You're not going to attend modules unless you desire to do this. Typically, MA students might be interested in, say, attending a particular year-3 course. If they're interested in that, they're not taking it to be graded or anything, just out of interest. So if you've ever been stressed, perhaps in a particular module, you were interested in a topic, but then having to perhaps do an exam or write an essay for that, that's not necessary. Here we have a weekly meeting for the master students, where each of you will present their own progress on their research, and you will essentially pick your own areas of philosophical interests here that you want to write about. And this will involve one-to-one supervision with members of the department. Currently, we have 8 departmental members, in addition to a couple more that are working on part-time contracts. We all have our distinct research interests and specializations. I encourage you to look at our website, but I'll go into a bit of our expertise in a minute. And essentially very different from how you might study MA module typically, or from your undergrad. Here you can really pick whatever topic you are interested in. This can be the ideal preparation, for instance, to pursue a PhD afterwards, as well as just in general, perhaps enter the job market with the research skills you've developed. There will also be a presentation component, but I'll get to that in a bit. So why join the University of Reading? We are number 7 in the UK for graduate prospects, according to the Complete University Guide in 2023. We're also in the top 125 in the world for history, philosophy, and theology in the World University rankings by subject. Now, interestingly, we don't have history and theology in this ranking, so this is really just driven by philosophy. So quite impressive that we nevertheless made it this high. And you can have 2 options essentially for studying our program. Currently, we have 1 student who does part-time, the others are doing it full-time. And essentially that's up to you, what you prefer. If you say want to work at the same time as doing your studies, you might think, oh, maybe part-time is better for you. And entry requirements typically is a good undergrad honors degree, 2.1 or equivalent in philosophy. It is in principle possible to join if you have a different background, as long as that's adjacent to philosophy. So it might be possible, say, for someone who did a psychology undergrad, potentially to join if they are then writing their philosophical essays all on the philosophy of psychology. So that's in principle possible if you have shown the capacity to engage in philosophy in the past. Now, for fees, currently they are for residents in the UK, Republic of Ireland, roughly £10,000, international roughly double with 21,000. These are updated every year. They might be increased by a few percentage points. Typically, that's what you can expect. Moving on, what are the course components? So that's perhaps the most interesting for you. Typically, if you think about different terms, you might have 5 modules you have to attend to, which might involve writing several essays, several exams. This is very different here. So really, in the year, in addition to the dissertation at the end, but we really have to only focus on 3 essays and 1 presentation. And For each of these essays, we encourage you to think about different topics you're interested in. Of course, there's so many philosophical subjects. It shouldn't be hard to find three that you'd be interested to write an essay about. You could think, for instance, about the essays you've written during undergrad. Perhaps there's something interesting to further pursue here. And then we ask you to write a dissertation, which you could almost see as a kind of miniature PhD thesis. So if you've ever considered doing a PhD, or if you want to test whether you cut out for it, this would be an ideal preparation by giving you a large piece of independent research to do, where you supervised by one member of the department, essentially like a PhD supervisor, but on a small scale, which counts the majority of your degree with 56%. And essentially how you could think of the essays is they are helping us as well as you to prepare yourself for the dissertation, which is why the third essay also counts a larger percentage of the grade. Essentially, we give you tips of how to improve your writing. We give you advice, targeted feedback in order to improve your writing further. And then we expect that your third essay should, in principle, do better than the first two, as well as being longer, giving you a bit more time to research, and then ultimately culminating in a research topic of your own choice. And what students often do is they pursue one of the essay topics in more detail or with a different angle in a dissertation length. So which topics can you pursue? Well, essentially all topics of philosophy. Of course, there's some perhaps very niche areas that we might not have present at Reading, but for general areas like philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, philosophy of action, epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy of science, philosophy of mathematics, aesthetic, ethics, political philosophy, philosophy of law, we have a lot of strength here. Also generally in philosophy of the special sciences, think of psychology, economics, perhaps political science, biology, we have strengths here where you can pursue your research interests in detail. We should be able to give you a targeted supervisor that has specialized in those areas. Furthermore, philosophy of religion, Plato, Aristotle, early modern philosophy, if you want to, for instance, write about Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, also Kant, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, and so we have quite a strength in the history of philosophy, if you're interested in that. But we also do we also cover some areas of philosophy that are typically not present in UK departments, such as continental philosophy. We have quite a strength here. So we have one departmental member, Max, who is a Marxist scholar and has a lot of expertise in these areas. And then we have also Indian philosophy. I myself had the honor to meet the Dalai Lama last year. So our department is very interested in, say, Buddhist philosophy. What do non-Western thinkers what have they contributed to philosophy? How might their concepts differ from how we might think, say, in the West about the philosophy of mind? Is there a self? Yes or no? So we have a lot of interesting areas that you might want to pursue. What is the schedule? This will be updated because we're moving from a term system to a two-term system, but essentially the dates almost remain the same. The essay 1 would be due by the end of autumn term, which is roughly at the end of December. Then you can expect another submission to be in March, then June, and the dissertation will be at the end of the year. So our semester starts, of course, in September. So the MA seminar is usually Tuesdays at 11:30. That can change depending on what other events are there during the week. We typically try to make it convenient to attend other university and departmental events. So for instance, we have the graduate student seminar, which is very similar to the MA seminar, but it's for PhD students. And we already encourage you to also be present in that. That's optional. But if you're considering, say, doing a PhD in philosophy, which I'm happy to give you feedback on or advice, then that can be a nice preparation because you can see what PhD students do. And the MA seminar, in a way, is a nice preparation for that. It's very similar similar in style. It's about preparing you to write essays, to discuss with students about your philosophical interests. You give presentations on your essay topics, as well as a graded one. Typically, students present one of the chapters of their dissertation, because then they can get useful feedback for the dissertation, but that's not necessarily the case. You can also present, say, one of your essay topics. And then in addition to this MA seminar, which takes place every week and typically lasts roughly 90 minutes, you also have independent supervision where you meet up with your supervisors, and you're likely to have 2 to 3 supervisors for that, because we encourage you to seek out different topics for the different essays instead of writing everything on the same topic. While that's in principle possible, it's better at this stage to expand your, say, philosophical expertise, to think about which are the areas you want to specialize in, and it's useful to have 2 or 3 at this stage. So I mentioned there's the graduate research seminar for PhD students, which you also encourage to attend. There's philosophy society talks, there's work in progress sessions, as well as research seminar talks where we invite international speakers at work in progress sessions. We have members internally in the department presenting the work and getting feedback by staff. So you can really sense the difference here, where as an undergrad, it feels more like being a student, but as a master student, to really put into this atmosphere of what it is like to be a member of a department, almost, where you can see, when you can be given this very different perspective on philosophy. The graduate class can be very useful, where staff present their research. We have reading groups for PPE, essentially politics, philosophy and economics. I'm also involved with running the PPE programs. I'm encouraging you very much to attend that if you're interested in it. We also have the Center for Cognition Research, where we have expertise. The Wittgenstein Forum, we have a very strong expertise in Wittgenstein, an annual ratio conference, which is the biggest philosophy conference we organize every year. And we typically have a different topic there each year, where renowned speakers come from abroad often. And finally, I mentioned it's possible for you to attend undergrad lectures from part 3, which are 3rd-year courses, if you're interested in them. It's not about getting graded exams or writing essays there, but it's just, if you're interested in a topic, this can give you a nice new insight. So I hope this was insightful, and if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Walter. That was a really useful insight into the course. We don't have any questions in the Q&A at the moment, but I thought something that might be useful, as this is such a obviously different type of degree to a standard MA or MSc, with the research being such a key component of it. What can you do after you've done an MA by research in philosophy? Can you progress into further study or a career? What are the options there?
Yeah. So because the degree is a MA by research, what really distinguishes it from many other MA programs is that it's very different in style. So most MA programs, you just attend, again, courses, modules, and they're on a higher level, of course. They often go into some more depth into the topics you've already been perhaps exploring. But this is quite different in style. So it's much more like a PhD. And I like to use the word mini PhD, because if you're thinking about pursuing a PhD, but you don't know, is that something I'd be interested in? This degree can really help you decide whether you're interested in pursuing research of this type. So really what this program prepares you for is to do research, and that's not necessarily within a university. You could pursue a career elsewhere. Say you might work for a member of parliament, do research for them. Perhaps you join an economics think tank where you contribute philosophical insights. Perhaps an AI institute, an AI startup, an ethicist at Google, say. AI ethics is a rapidly growing area, and we have several students now writing their essays, in fact, on AI ethics, because it's an exploding area in philosophy, and there's a lot of jobs being created. So it's not necessarily that you have to think of this degree as purely being a nice springboard if you want to pursue a PhD, even though this is what it's primarily designed for, but really it helps you to pursue any kind of research career where you might, even outside of academia, think about, oh, I just love getting really into depth into a particular topic, writing about it. Think about, say, a career in journalism, where it's often something philosophy students pursue. So if you're interested in research, if you liked essay writing the most during your undergrad, thinking about writing your dissertation there, this is perhaps an ideal program for that.
Thank you, Walter. Also on the theme of careers, just had another question come through. What kind of roles, I think you touched on this a little bit, what kind of roles do graduates from this course typically go on to do if it's not further research?
Yeah, so because I only took over this role last year, I don't know exactly what people before did due to anonymity. We typically don't get all the information. I do know that a lot of them went on to pursue a PhD and are now lecturers in different UK universities. So there has been a very high success rate of our master students to then successfully do a PhD, which is something that's important because actually there's a lot of PhD students who within their studies stop or don't manage to get a job afterwards, but we have a very good track record actually at getting people into lecturer positions down the line. So unfortunately, I can't give you information where exactly people went to because people pursue different things. One of our MA students is now thinking of doing another MA, also 1 year on a very different area, but they want to do a PhD afterwards. And another one of our students, or anonymous, is interested in pursuing a career in teaching, becoming a teacher at a UK private or public school, say, and that could also be good preparation. After all, if you want to be a teacher, you have to prepare your materials every week, and the research skills you develop here, the skills of evaluating what it means to have a good essay, what it means to give a good presentation, those are all skills that will be useful down the line.
Thank you. You've talked a little bit about the community on the course and how it's quite a different feeling to studying as an undergrad. What's kind of the makeup of the course? Is it a mix of recent graduates and returners to education, UK students, international students? Kind of what's it like to be a student on this course?
Yeah, so during COVID, as with many universities, the numbers drastically dropped because it's very hard to study this program via distance learning. It's very important to be at the department, to participate in our seminar, to discuss with students, to engage with your supervisors. So at the moment, we only have UK students. Before that, I think it was roughly 11 students in total, and I think roughly 2 of them were international students, where we had more from the EU. So now, because of Brexit, those numbers are, I think, a bit down. I think we currently have someone who might come in from France. So typically it's students who have done philosophy before. Some of them, however, have taken a little bit of a break and then return to study philosophy. So if you have been outside of academia, you've worked for a few years, say, but you're interested in coming back into research, into academia, because it was a very nice environment, then this might be the ideal way of doing it. It puts you back into this position of being in a university, and we like to prepare students, if they're interested in pursuing a PhD, and giving them feedback and advice of how do you apply for PhDs, how do you get funding for that, what does it mean to write a successful proposal. So we very much try to prepare students for that if they're interested in that. And on the other side, if you're interested in going back into the non-academic world, as most students, of course, do, not everyone stays in academia, then we really want to focus on, well, improve your presentation skills, your research skills, your writing skills, and those are typically useful whatever career you want to pursue afterwards. But yes, most of the students at the moment are UK students.
Okay, great, thank you. And you mentioned that a lot of people on the course are people who have previously studied philosophy, but if you're not someone who's done a philosophy undergraduate degree, can you still apply? And what kind of subjects would you be looking for? What kind of qualifications?
Yeah, so that would be very individual. So we would want to see from the individual that they have a lot of interest in philosophy, and that they can catch up, so to speak. So I mentioned the example of, if we imagine someone who studied psychology during the undergrad, it's very possible for them to write multiple essays in areas of philosophy of psychology, philosophy of mind, and then even to pursue a PhD in this area. It's not uncommon in philosophy for people to switch, say, from a science background to philosophy, but it can be hard to jump immediately into philosophy. PhD, typically you would be rejected for that if you don't have any background in philosophy. So if you do that, we would encourage you typically to attend some one or two, say, per term of the year 3 courses, just to get a feel of what it means to be part of such a lecture without being graded. But typically we would then encourage you to write on topics related to what you've done before. So say politics, you can work in political philosophy, you could write on, say, issues relating to racial justice, ethics of, say, economic taxation laws and the like. Similarly, for economic students, topics could be adjacent to those areas. It would be harder for someone who has no philosophical background to join a program and then write on topics completely unrelated to what they've done before. But I wouldn't say impossible if they can make a good case for that. So you can see my email. At least you can also find it online. If you look up the master program in Reading, it was on the last slide. You can write me an email with your background. Say if you don't have a philosophy background, but you'd be interested in this program because it is very unique in the UK. I'd be very happy to look at your, say, CV and think about or give you advice on whether this would work out for you. But typically, we're very happy for people to have a strong interest in philosophy to join us if they don't have a huge background. But we would definitely want to see that they would succeed in our program. We want to see promise, at least. We don't want to take a student that we think, oh, there's a high probability that they would fail in a program because they have no background in philosophy. We really want to focus on them getting success.
Thank you. That was a really useful answer. We have a question from someone interested potentially in part-time study, just asking kind of, is that something that you would recommend? What's the kind of balance like for someone who's studying part-time and also maybe working?
Yeah, I think the part-time program is actually a great idea because essentially what it does, it gives you way more time to think in a lot of depth about a particular topic. The deadlines are simply further spaced out. You might just multiply them by 2. And we have one of our students currently doing that. They work part-time and at the same time think about the essays, and they have a lot of time to prepare, and typically that might have some impact then on the grades. Of course, if someone does a lot of work on the side, they might not actually have more time for writing, but it can be useful, especially with fees. It might be easier to handle them like that, or say for accommodations. That might be easier to afford than if you're working part-time. And also, if you are studying full-time, that can be stressful, right? If you spend an entire year doing research, you spend a lot of time in the library, on your computer, it can just be a good mental break to then go out there, leave your house, perhaps work, have a very different environment. That can be good for mental health. Because academia can be stressful, and we try to give you a lot of tips on how you can maintain mental health, that it doesn't become too overwhelming. And this is why we only have 3 essays. They're the longer, but we really want to focus on, look, you don't have to be too stressed about writing, say, 10 essays. No. It's about thinking about one topic in a lot of depth, and typically students in the end struggle to get down to the word limit. They write a lot and then they have to reduce it. So the part-time program is quite successful. And yeah, if you're interested in pursuing that, if you have a lot of other issues that might interfere with focusing almost exclusively on research for, say, 35 hours a week, then that might be better. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We've got 3 minutes left, so I think we just have time for one more question. And this is kind of a follow-up, also relating to part-time study. How far in advance are students able to kind of find out their timetabling so that they can plan kind of what research and study around other commitments?
Yeah. So typically that's very easy because we try to let everyone take part in deciding when our MA seminar takes place, which is technically the only obligatory event per week. So that's roughly 90 minutes at the university. All other events are typically optional. Of course, meeting with your supervisors, you'll individually with them discuss when to meet. And we simply decide for a time spot that fits everyone for the MA seminar. So I don't think you should be worried about that. So it's not like sometimes undergrads complain to me that some of the lectures take place at 9 a.m. And that can be stressful, or really late in the evening, or like say 5 p.m. That's not something that happens here. Typically, we schedule the meeting when everyone has time at a convenient time. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Walter, for your insights about the course. I found that really useful, so hopefully our attendees have as well. We are pretty much out of time, so I'd just like to remind everyone that you'll be able to view this recording on demand after the session as well, and remember to check out the rest of the programme for other events that are taking place throughout the day, as well as our dedicated website where there are other live and in-demand sessions available as well. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.